She was already waist-deep in my pond, holding a laminated sign that said, "Private HOA Property," when I realized I wasn't dealing with your average nosy neighbor. I was dealing with a full-blown delusional Karen in a pantsuit and pearls. She didn't notice me standing behind her on the dock until I cleared my throat, loudly. She turned, water dripping from her sleeves, and gave me a smug little smile like I had just stumbled into her backyard barbecue. "Oh good you're here," she chirped. "We're finalizing the new HOA zoning lines and this water feature is officially part of the Gladeview community." She gestured like she was presenting a new hot tub on The Price is Right, then slapped the laminated sign onto a wooden post she must have dragged in earlier. I blinked. "You're standing in my pond," I said. "Which is, and has always been, on my land." Her smile didn't budge. "Not anymore," she replied. "The HOA voted, and it was unanimous. The pond is now a shared amenity. We're planning a summer luau for the residents." I stared at her, trying to decide if this was performance art or psychosis. Then I spotted the clipboard floating behind her in the shallows, printed maps, highlighted lines, and a very real HOA logo in the corner. That's when I knew this was going to get ugly. Now for context, I bought this property 3 years ago. 10 acres, wooded, with an old stone farmhouse and a spring-fed pond that mirrored the sky like something out of a postcard. It was outside the HOA boundaries, explicitly outside, and I liked it that way. I don't do pool rules or mailbox inspections. The HOA, however, had grown since I moved in. Little by little, they swallowed up nearby lots, and Gladeview became a sprawling collection of beige conformity. But they never touched my place. Until, apparently, Karen got elected president. Karen, full name Karen Delacourt, was the kind of person who corrected people's grammar in casual conversation and had a framed certificate from Toastmasters in her foyer. She lived 2 cul-de-sacs over but treated the HOA like a miniature kingdom. The power had gone to her head so fast I swear it gave her vertigo. The first time we met, she tried to issue me a citation for having a gravel driveway. I reminded her I didn't live in Gladeview. She acted like I'd told her I didn't believe in gravity. Back to the pond. Karen finally sloshed her way out and marched past me with water in her shoes and a ridiculous air of authority. "Expect a formal notice within the week," she huffed. "The pond belongs to the community now. You've been served." She stormed off, heels squishing with every step. I stood there, staring at the laminated sign that now fluttered in the breeze over my lily pads, and I made a decision. If she wanted a war, she'd picked the wrong battlefield. Because I don't throw tantrums. I throw curveballs. The first move came 5 days later. I received an envelope hand-delivered to my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in Comic Sans of all things, titled Notice of Shared Pond Ownership. It went on to explain that, due to a recent revision of neighborhood borders, my pond was now classified as a communal water feature, and I was encouraged to stop treating it as personal property. It ended with a threat of formal enforcement actions if I obstructed community access. The whole thing was signed President K. Delacourt, Gladeview HOA. Now here's the twist. There had been no official annexation, no county record change, no legal claim filed. It was all smoke, mirrors, and Karen's weaponized clipboard. She was counting on intimidation. Problem was, I don't intimidate. I investigate. 2 hours later, I had maps from the zoning office, GPS coordinates, property boundary filings, and a 48-page PDF from the county assessor. Every inch of the pond was mine. Not a drop of water touched Gladeview soil. I even found an old survey from the 90s that showed the fence line 40 feet from the pond's edge. I was in the clear. But Karen had one weapon left: the court of public opinion. That weekend, I saw it all unfold on the Gladeview Facebook page. A photo of the pond with a caption: "Excited to announce our new HOA water feature. Get ready for kayaking, paddleboarding, and family event. #GladeviewStrong." Comments poured in. So beautiful. Can't wait to fish there. One resident asked who owned it. Karen replied, it's community land now. The board handled it. I nearly choked on my coffee. The board handled it? Like it was a minor plumbing issue? But what really lit the fuse was what happened that Sunday. I was working on my back deck when I heard voices, kids laughing, splashing. I walked down to the pond and found 4 kids jumping off my dock, their parents lounging on folding chairs by the edge. A picnic basket was open. One dad gave me a nod like I was the groundskeeper. I asked them politely what they were doing. Oh, Karen said it was fine, one mom said. She said the HOA approved it. I said, the HOA doesn't own this pond. She laughed. That's not what she told us. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I went back inside, poured myself a drink, and booted up a website I hadn't used in years. An old prank supply vendor. I ordered 5 gallons of non-toxic fluorescent blue water dye, the kind used in golf course ponds and fountain shows. 2 days later, I poured every last drop into my spring inlet. By sunset, the pond glowed like it had been attacked by Avatar. The next morning, I put up a sign, simple plywood nailed to a post that read, "Caution, algae bloom detected. Water testing in progress. Do not enter. May cause rash." Just underneath, I stapled a fake memo from a non-existent company called Tri-County Environmental Monitoring Group. I even added a phony hotline number that rang through to a voicemail I'd set up with a monotone warning. Thank you for calling Tri-County. The water is currently under toxic algae bloom. Please stay clear. Within hours, the Gladeview Facebook page was in meltdown. Does anyone know what happened to our pond? Karen said it was safe. Why is it glowing? Someone uploaded a video of the pond at night. It looked radioactive. A few conspiracy theorists claimed I'd poisoned it. Karen, of course, doubled down, insisting it was naturally occurring and temporary. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Nobody wants their kid swimming in a Chernobyl cosplay pool. Karen showed up the next day in a mask and gloves, trying to remove my signs. I caught her in the act and just waved. Careful, I said. Still testing positive for neurotoxins. She froze, dropped the sign, and backed away like it might explode. This isn't over, she hissed. You're trespassing, I replied. On my land. She left in silence for once. But I knew she wasn't done. People like Karen don't surrender. They escalate. And when she did, I'd be waiting with my next move, because this wasn't just about a pond anymore. It was about proving, once and for all, that you don't get to steamroll people just because you like laminated signs and think HOA President is a real job title. She wanted a war. I was just getting warmed up. The very next morning, I opened my curtains to a sight so petty it could only have been masterminded by someone who alphabetizes their spice rack out of spite. On the narrow road leading to my property, right next to my old wooden mailbox, a brand new steel sign had been cemented into the shoulder. It read, Gladeview Community Pond, Access Trail. The arrow pointed directly at my gravel driveway. Not beside it. Not near it. Into it. She was trying to mark my driveway as a public trailhead. I stood there for a moment in my robe, watching a jogger stop to read it, check their phone, and then look down my driveway like they were considering whether they had time for a scenic detour before brunch. I stepped outside just in time to see them take a few tentative steps toward the gate. Looking for the pond? I asked. They nodded sheepishly. Karen said it was open access now. I smiled. It's open, all right, I said. Open for lawsuits. They turned around so fast they nearly tripped over their own shoelaces. This wasn't just a turf war anymore, it was a full-blown narrative battle. Karen wasn't trying to legally seize my pond. She was trying to gaslight the entire community into believing it had always been theirs. She wanted people to use it until it became common behavior, until her lie turned into something that looked like truth. It was HOA manifest destiny. So I did what any good long-game strategist would do. I documented everything. I started a private folder titled Operation Pond Snatch. Every interaction, every new sign, every Facebook post. I dated them, time-stamped them, took photos, videos, even screen recordings. I wanted a timeline so airtight it could suffocate a lawsuit. Because I had a hunch. Karen wasn't just doing this to play Queen Bee. She was doing it to cover up something far more damaging. Sure enough, the cracks started to show within a week. It began when I got a call from Doug, a mild-mannered, khaki-wearing dad who lived 2 streets over in Gladeview. He was the type who usually avoided confrontation by hiding behind his grill. "Hey," he said hesitantly, "I was wondering if you ever got a tax assessment notice for that pond?" I told him no, of course not. I owned the land outright and the spring was grandfathered in. Doug let out a low whistle. That's funny. Karen's been telling the HOA that the pond maintenance fees were coming out of the community budget." There it was. I thanked Doug and hung up. Then I dove into the HOA's public meeting minutes, which, lucky for me, Karen had posted online in an attempt to seem transparent. That month's entry mentioned a line item: new shared amenity upkeep, water feature perimeter landscaping and mosquito control. $2,400. Paid to a company called Delacorte Landscaping Services. I nearly choked. She hadn't just made up the pond ownership. She was billing the HOA for its maintenance, and paying herself through her husband's LLC. Suddenly the trail markers, the Facebook posts, the fake community events, it all clicked. Karen wasn't just power tripping. She was embezzling, and using my pond as her personal money laundering car wash. I could have gone nuclear right then. Called a lawyer. Sent a cease and desist. But no, that would have given her too much time to pivot. So instead, I went fishing. Literally. Saturday morning, I sat on my dock in full view of the walking path with a cooler, a folding chair, and a very obvious GoPro set up on a tripod. I was wearing a shirt that said private property. No trespassing. Smile for the lawyers. It wasn't subtle, but it was bait. Within 30 minutes, a family of 4 came strolling down the path, fishing poles in hand. I waved. "Hey there," I said. "Just so you know, this pond isn't public." The dad glanced over. Karen said it's HOA. Said it was in the new bylaws. I nodded, totally calm. Did she say that in writing? He hesitated. Well, not exactly. I pointed to the GoPro. Do me a favor. Just say your name and that she told you this was HOA land. He looked deeply uncomfortable. We'll just go, he muttered. I smiled. Probably smart. But it worked. Word started spreading that something wasn't right with Karen's story. The dye hadn't faded yet, and now the signs I'd posted were being shared in community group. People were asking questions. Karen's once devoted flock was getting restless. And right on cue, she retaliated. The following Tuesday, I came home to find a small group gathered in front of my property. Karen, 2 HOA board members, and a man in a polo shirt holding a clipboard. As I pulled up, Karen flagged me down like I was a delivery guy. There you are, she said. You're just in time. This is Greg. He's with the county. We're submitting an easement request for community access. I stepped out of the truck, locked it, and looked Greg in the eye. This land is not under HOA jurisdiction. Any access through it would require my consent. Greg looked awkward. That's why we're requesting an easement, he said, clearly uncomfortable. We just need to document the boundary for the application process. I laughed. Actually laughed. Great, I said. Let's walk the boundary together. I've got all the documents ready. You'll find the HOA line stops 73 feet before the pond inlet. Karen cut in. That's debatable. I opened my glove box, pulled out a laminated copy of the county zoning map, and held it up. No, it's literally not. But go ahead. Apply. The rejection letter will look great framed next to your HOA presidency certificate. She stared at me with a mix of rage and embarrassment. The two board members looked like they wanted to sink into the lawn. Greg mumbled something about needing to review materials, and backed away toward his car. Karen followed, fuming. Now the stakes had changed. She'd lost the narrative. She was running out of lies, and desperate people make sloppy moves. That night I heard voices again, sneaky, whispering ones. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, and found two teenagers ducking behind the pond reed. One had a can of spray paint. The other had a giant stencil. I didn't yell. I just said, "Tell Karen I've got a security camera pointing at you. And if I find one more fake sign on this property, the next phone call won't be to her. It'll be to your parents and then the sheriff." They bolted. But I got what I needed. Their faces, clear as day, on camera. And I knew Karen had sent them. She wouldn't get her own hands dirty. But she'd throw a couple of underage volunteers into the line of fire if it meant saving face. I posted the footage anonymously in the Gladeview group the next morning. Caption: Karen's Pond Parade, now recruiting teen vandalism interns? The video went viral. The comments were savage. People started tagging board members. One even said, "Can we recall a president for pond fraud?" Karen didn't show her face for 3 days. Then, just as I was beginning to think she might slither away quietly, she re-emerged with a move so outlandish I almost respected the audacity. She put my pond on Airbnb. No joke. A listing went up: serene private pond with dock. Perfect for picnics, paddling, and photo shoots. $49 per day access pass. The pictures were mine. My dock. My chairs. Even my kayak, still tied to the post. The listing claimed it was community managed and all proceeds went to HOA beautification efforts. Her contact info was in the listing email. It was brazen. It was illegal. It was game. The Airbnb listing disappeared less than 24 hours after I reported it, but that wasn't the point. The point was that Karen thought she could commercialize my pond like it was her own backyard water park. Worse, she still didn't seem to understand how badly she'd overplayed her hand. When I sent a formal cease and desist letter through my lawyer, her response wasn't to back down, it was to double down. She sent back a rebuttal notice, filled with laughable pseudo-legal jargon like customary public ingress precedent and acquired communal use clause. She even included fake HOA meeting notes where she'd allegedly approved my pond for recreational leasing, backdated, of course, and signed only by herself. It was like watching a toddler draw a pirate map and call it a deed. Still, the problem with delusion is that sometimes people believe it if it's loud enough. A few Gladeview residents, mostly Karen's usual yes-men, were still convinced she was in the right. I even overheard one man at the farmer's market say, "It's just water. Why's he being so greedy?" I didn't say anything. I just slipped a flyer into his reusable bag when he wasn't looking. It read, in bold letters, "Would you let a stranger build a hot tub in your bedroom? Because that's what this is." But snark alone wasn't going to cut it anymore. Karen was escalating into fraud, and I needed backup. Real backup. Enter Jenna. Jenna was a local environmental compliance officer who I'd worked with a couple of years back when a nearby property tried to reroute part of the creek that fed into my pond. She had a wicked sense of humor and a talent for sniffing out violations the way a bloodhound sniffs out buried turkey. I emailed her everything. Photos, PDFs, the Airbnb listing, screenshots of the HOA Facebook brag posts, and a copy of the fake maintenance invoice Karen had submitted to her own board. Jenna called me less than an hour later. "Tell me you're joking," she said. "I wish I was," I replied. This woman submitted a claim for mosquito control on a pond she doesn't own and charged the HOA for it. She also rented it on Airbnb and told people it was a community water feature. Jenna let out a long, slow whistle. "All right," she said. "I'm in." She showed up the next morning with a clipboard, a measuring wheel, and the kind of gleam in her eye usually reserved for demolitions experts and prosecutors. We walked the entire boundary together. She confirmed every inch of the survey I'd already documented. She tested the water just to be thorough. She even took samples from the inlet and outlet pipe. If she's been dumping anything in here for mosquito control, we'll know, she said with a grin. Then came the piece de resistance. Jenna arranged a surprise inspection of Gladeview's HOA grounds maintenance records through the county compliance office. Karen didn't see it coming. And when she opened the door that Thursday afternoon to find 2 city officials and a water department rep on her porch, clipboard in hand, the look on her face reportedly resembled someone being told they were the next contestant on To Catch a Predator. I wasn't there personally, I didn't need to be. But I did get the follow-up call from Jenna that evening, and it was glorious. She panicked, Jenna said. Tried to say the HOA board approved all her actions. When we asked for the vote records, she couldn't provide them. Claimed they'd been misplaced during the transition to digital archives. I laughed. So what happens now? She's under review for misuse of HOA funds. And if we find any trace of pesticide or chemical runoff near the springhead, that's a whole other violation. Might even trigger a county fine. Possibly criminal misrepresentation, if she actually filed those invoices to the bank. It was sweet, but I wasn't celebrating just yet. Karen wasn't the type to go quietly, and I could feel the storm building behind her silence. And I was right. 2 days later, I returned home to find a county vehicle parked near my fence line. A worker was placing a bright orange caution, "Water under review," stake near the ditch by the road. I approached and asked what was going on. He told me someone had filed an anonymous report accusing me of polluting the local watershed. "You're joking," I said. He shook his head. "Sorry. We got a report that a property owner here may have dumped hazardous dye into a natural water source." I stared at him. "You mean the non-toxic blue fountain dye used by every golf course in the state?" He smiled apologetically. "Yeah. That one." I sighed. "Let me guess. Female caller. Late 40s. Probably said the word ecological at least 3 times. He chuckled. "We're not supposed to say." I invited him in, showed him the packaging from the dye, clearly labeled safe for wildlife, fish, and even humans, and then pulled up the video of Karen's Facebook post where she called the dye a cheap trick to make the pond look tropical. He shook his head. "This happens more than you'd think," he said. "Petty neighbor stuff. I'll close the case out." But I wasn't annoyed. I was impressed. Karen had weaponized bureaucracy, filing a fake environmental complaint to try and discredit me just days after being slapped with one herself. It was the HOA Cold War now. Paperwork against paperwork, claims versus counterclaims. I needed to end it. So I made one final move. Not petty. Not reactive. Strategic. I called a local journalist named Reed Tanner. Reed ran the community section of the county paper and had a reputation for exposing corrupt HOAs, mismanaged nonprofits, and local scandals. I gave him everything, all the records, the surveys, the fake Airbnb listing, the dye incident, the harassment, and, most importantly, the forged financial documents from the HOA's expense report. His article ran on Sunday. HOA President accused of land grabbing, misuse of funds in Gladeview Pond scandal. There was a picture of the glowing blue pond at sunset, Karen's trail sign, and the fake Airbnb listing. The article quoted county officials, HOA members who admitted they never approved the spending, and a lovely little soundbite from me. "I'm all for neighborly kindness, but trespass disguised as policy isn't community, it's corruption." The reaction was nuclear. The HOA called an emergency board meeting. Over 40 residents showed up. I didn't attend, I just watched the livestream someone uploaded. Karen tried to explain herself. Blamed a lack of procedural clarity. Claimed I'd weaponized misinformation. But it didn't work this time. She was voted out as president that night. Unanimously. Her resignation letter was read aloud before she stormed out. And just like that, the war ended. No grand finale. No last-minute comeback. Just a quiet, bitter collapse. A week later, I took down the fake algae warning signs and flushed the last of the dye from the pond with a fresh run from the spring inlet. The water turned clear again, but the metaphor stayed vivid. People kept asking me what I was going to do now, whether I'd sue, press charges, demand restitution. I thought about it. Then I built a 10-foot wooden fence around the pond, posted 3 new private property signs, and donated the rest of the fluorescent dye to the local high school's theater department. Because in the end, Karen didn't just lose the pond. She lost her power, her credibility, her illusion of control. And all I had to do was let her talk herself into a corner and hand her the microphone. It should have ended there. With Karen dethroned, her scams exposed, and her influence buried under a mountain of laminated lies, any reasonable person would have backed off. But Karen wasn't reasonable. She was vindictive. And when she couldn't win through manipulation or policy, she resorted to the last weapon in her arsenal: retaliation through chaos. It started small. A tipped-over trash bin near my mailbox. Then tire tracks through my lower field that wasn't visible from the road. I chalked it up to random mischief. But then my Amazon deliveries began going missing. Packages that were marked as delivered would vanish before I got home, even the ones hidden behind my planter box. I set up a motion-activated camera by the porch, caught a teenager in a gray hoodie making off with a package of plumbing parts I'd ordered. I handed the footage over to the sheriff. A week later, the kid confessed. Said he was paid $50 by a woman in a Lexus who didn't want her name involved. I didn't need a courtroom to figure out who that was. I wanted to be done with this war. I'd already won. The community knew the truth. The pond was mine, the fake invoices were exposed, and Karen had gone from self-appointed queen to neighborhood pariah. But now she wasn't fighting for control. She was trying to punish me. Her HOA presidency was over, so she switched tactics from ruler to saboteur. The final straw came when I received a citation taped to my door, an actual county violation notice claiming that I had altered a natural waterway without proper permits. The complaint included photos of the blue pond from weeks earlier and a printed statement alleging that I had intentionally disrupted native aquatic ecosystems with artificial chemicals. My heart dropped, not because I was guilty, but because this time she'd managed to exploit a real government process. Someone had filed an official complaint under my name. It wasn't just annoying anymore. It was dangerous. I drove straight to the county office the next morning, armed with every document I had. The front desk clerk recognized me before I even sat down. "Oh," she said, "you're the pond guy. We've had a few calls about this." I laid out everything: proof of the dye being safe, Jenna's environmental report, the video footage, the previous complaint filed against Karen, not me. It took half an hour, but eventually, the compliance officer tore up the citation. "This should have never been filed without verification," he said. "We're going to look into who submitted this under your name." Spoiler: the name used on the form was Jefferson K. Daniels. That's not my name. It was Karen's neighbor's cat's name. I wish I were kidding. That's when I realized we weren't in HOA land anymore. We were in scorched earth territory. So I made a call. Not to a lawyer. To my cousin Ava. Ava works in digital security and cyber fraud investigation for a major insurance firm. She once helped expose a guy who was running a fake GoFundMe scam by tracing his burner phone through a cloud backup. When I told her what was going on, she didn't laugh, she leaned in. "All right," she said, "let's find out how far this rabbit hole goes." We set up digital traps. Created a fake social media account pretending to be a new resident in Gladeview interested in community pond access. Ava linked the account to a burner email we controlled. Within 2 days of posting in a community thread, "New here. Wondering how to get access to the pond everyone talks about?" We got a DM from a dummy account called Info. The message said, "Contact kedelacourtjoe@gmail.com for passes. Mention resident discount." Ava traced the email origin through a leaked metadata chain. The recovery phone number was tied to a Verizon family plan registered to a man named Brent Delacourt, Karen's husband. We had digital proof she was still trying to monetize access to my pond, after being removed from the HOA, after being publicly exposed, after being investigated. Now we had enough for a restraining order, maybe even a criminal complaint. But I wanted more than a court order. I wanted a lesson. And that's where the idea hit me. Karen's entire persona was based on control. She loved being in charge, loved appearances, loved the image of authority even when the substance didn't exist. So what better way to crush her than to turn her own fantasy against her? I bought a costume. Correction, I rented a full hazmat suit. Not the cheap Halloween kind, the real, full-body, ventilated face shield model. I called in a favor from a friend in the local wildlife bureau who had access to unused signage from a water contamination training drill. Then, one glorious Sunday morning, I suited up, rolled a small trailer down to the edge of the pond, and posted 4 bright yellow signs. They read, "Biohazard Zone, Active Treatment in Progress, Do Not Enter." I made sure I did it in full view of the road. I even staged a little scene, pretended to test the water with fake equipment while Ava filmed from the woods with a long lens. Karen came speeding down the hill in her Lexus 10 minutes later. She didn't even park. Just threw the car in neutral, flung the door open, and came waddling down the gravel in her wedge sandals, absolutely red-faced. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked. I turned, face hidden behind the mask, and calmly said, "Ongoing wildlife decontamination. Please stay back." "You can't do this," she barked. "That pond belongs to the community." I held out a laminated copy of the property survey and tapped a bolded sentence that read, "Private land, unincorporated, not subject to HOA or municipal shared resource claims." She looked like she might spontaneously combust. "You're faking this," she hissed. "You're trying to ruin the value of the whole neighborhood." I tilted my head and, through the mask's voice filter, said, "Actually, I'm protecting the local amphibian population from residual glyphosate runoff. It's a public service." She screamed. Not a shout. A full-bodied banshee scream. And then she did what I was praying she'd do. She grabbed one of the signs and ripped it out of the ground. I turned to the hidden camera Ava had set up behind a log and gave it a subtle thumbs up. Within hours, that footage, clean, crisp, and uncut, was uploaded to a private link and sent to the Gladeview HOA board. I didn't say a word. Just titled the email, "Your former president violating federal biohazard protocol. Enjoy." 2 board members replied within minutes. By Monday, Karen's lawyer contacted me. "My client would like to resolve this matter amicably and requests that you cease all further public communications about her family." I replied with one sentence. "Tell your client to stop trespassing, stop filing false claims, and start worrying about the HOA civil lawsuit I know is brewing." Because it was. Jenna confirmed that the HOA was now under county audit due to the bogus invoices. Karen wasn't just on thin ice. She was standing on a frozen lake with a blowtorch. I took down the biohazard signs later that week. The suit went back to the rental shop. But the message had been delivered. Karen wanted to play games. I just beat her at her own. Funny thing is, I hadn't even touched her property once. I hadn't retaliated with damage or destruction. Just signs, cameras, truth, and a little theatric. The pond remained mine. Untouched. Clean. But Karen? She was radioactive now. Summer rolled in hot and thick, the kind of humid that makes every screen door creak louder and turns every neighborhood dispute into a slow boil. But not much stirred around my pond anymore, not since the biohazard debacle, as Gladeview had come to call it. The dye had faded weeks ago, the frogs were back, and dragonflies skimmed the surface like nothing had ever happened. Nature forgets. But humans? Not so much. Karen had gone quiet, at least in public. Her Lexus still made the occasional sad lap through the cul-de-sac, her window always rolled up, face barely visible behind a pair of oversized sunglasses she probably hoped made her look mysterious instead of exiled. It was over. Not with a bang, but with an HOA-wide whimper. The pond she tried to claim had become a local cautionary tale. Every time someone in Gladeview suggested a community initiative, you could count on someone muttering, like the Delacourt disaster? Under their breath. But just as I began to believe the war was truly over, something odd happened. I got mail. Not unusual on its own. But this wasn't a bill, or junk, or a seed catalog I didn't remember subscribing to. This was a cream-colored envelope, heavy paper, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. You don't know me, but I live 2 streets over. Thank you. A lot of us were afraid to speak up. Karen's been bullying this neighborhood for years. What you did, it gave people permission to stand up. Attached was a folded flyer. An invitation to a Gladeview community meeting, one hosted by residents, not the HOA board. The topic? Reforming the bylaws to limit presidential power and prevent future financial abuse. I smiled. The pond didn't just stay mine. It sparked something. I didn't go to the meeting, I didn't need to. I wasn't looking to lead any neighborhood revolutions. I'd had enough HOA drama to last a lifetime. But still I was glad. Maybe the neighborhood would become a little more decent now, a little more resistant to self-declared royalty with clipboards and a god complex. Karen, of course, wasn't done entirely. One final attempt came in the form of a petition. I use that term loosely. It was a stack of photocopied sheets that began circulating in the neighborhood, calling for my removal from shared resource zones. Never mind that I wasn't part of the HOA, and there was no mechanism by which they could remove me from anything. The petition was riddled with grammatical errors and legal gibberish. My favorite line was, "Mr. Pondman, as many of us have taken to calling him, has maliciously repelled neighborhood engagement through aquatic obstruction." Aquatic obstruction. I nearly framed that one. But the best part? It backfired. People started calling me Mr. Pondman, unironically, at the bakery, at the hardware store, even at the post office. One guy honked and yelled it out his truck window like it was a compliment. Somehow, through sheer Karen-fueled irony, I'd become a weird little local legend. Still, something felt unfinished. Karen had caused months of havoc. She'd trespassed, lied, defrauded, harassed, and tried to weaponize the system against me. And though she was disgraced, she hadn't really paid a price. She'd stepped down, sure. Lost credibility. But no fines, no charges, no real consequences. Until the audit concluded. I got the call from Jenna first. "You might want to pick up a newspaper tomorrow," she said. Page 3. Lower half. The headline read, "Former HOA President under investigation for fraud, misuse of funds." The article laid out everything: unauthorized maintenance charges, embezzlement through a family landscaping company, false community asset claims, and multiple residents alleging pressure, threats, and retaliation. My name wasn't even mentioned. I didn't need it to be. The facts spoke loudly enough. By the end of that week, the Gladeview HOA voted to dissolve its current structure entirely. They replaced it with a voluntary neighborhood association. No fines, no enforcers, no president. Just committees. The role Karen built her identity around? Erased. Poof. I didn't see her again for months. Rumor had it she and her husband put the house on the market quietly and moved 2 towns over. Apparently, she tried to run for the neighborhood committee in the new place. The joke was that her application got accidentally shredded. Twice. My pond returned to peace. No trail signs. No beach chairs. No suspicious kids fishing with half-baited hooks and guilty expressions. Just the breeze, the frogs, and the occasional deer that wandered down for a drink. But here's the thing no one tells you about conflict: sometimes it doesn't end. It just shifted. A few weeks after Karen left, a new neighbor moved in just outside Gladeview's old boundary. A guy in his 50s, big fan of xeriscaping and loud Bluetooth calls on his patio. First thing he asked me? "Hey, do you charge for pond access or is it like public?" I took a long sip of coffee, turned toward him slowly, and said, "Let me tell you a story." And that's when I realized I didn't mind anymore. Because this place, this pond, this land, it had been threatened and I held my ground. Not with fists. Not with fences. With facts, with patience, with humor, and with the kind of stubborn calm that drives Karens absolutely insane. I kept the wooden board from the toxic water, "Do not enter" stunt. It's in my shed now, leaning next to the rake and the emergency dye stash I've never used again. Maybe I'll burn it one day. Maybe I'll hang it in my garage like a war trophy. But for now, I keep it as a reminder, not just of what happened, but of how to deal with the next one. Because there's always a next one. The next clipboard warrior. The next neighbor who thinks law is just a suggestion. The next person who sees something beautiful and assumes it must belong to them. But they'll have to go through me. Mr. Pondman. King of aquatic obstruction. And I'll be ready.